I wanted to say, you talked about going all in on your spouse. There's a saying I heard that I think is amazing when you really want to get into something is, are you going to go a mile wide and an inch deep, not get very much depth to the whatever it is, or you can go a mile deep and an inch wide. I mean, really
nice.
Dive into your marriage and your wife or your husband.
Those who do this claim that they still have a great, wonderful relationship and that they've got all that depth. But pragmatics of it just suggest to me, I think they're fooling themselves over time.
I would argue that they don't really love anybody, because you had mentioned earlier that people will say, "Oh, well, I can love more than one child." How I love my son or my daughter is very different than how I love my wife, and how I love a friend is very different than how I love my child or how I love my wife. Those are different types of love.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
I don't know if I would ruffle feathers, but I'm going to ask this. I almost feel like this is kind of connected to the instant gratification issue in our culture now that's really been amplified by social media and the internet. I'm very tempted to say this is a pathology, if I'm using that word correctly, this type of behavior.
Liz could speak better to it. I think there can be pathologies involved with this. I think more likely it comes from the more garden variety challenges of the fear of commitment, of not wanting to leave open sexual relationships behind. One of the fear that many people have about marriage is, really? I'm going to be just that one person for the rest of my life? Yeah. Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. Okay. It's that more kind of garden variety. I've lived my young life with open sexual relationships. I don't want to close them off. This feels, so I don't call that a pathology. I call that a culture. We live in an anti commitment kind of a culture, and a never wanting to close off options culture.
I think that's beautifully said, Alan. I think that's really well said. I love that.
Slice it in then somehow. If it was somehow brilliant, make sure you slice it back in somewhere.
I think that was really good. Just because I'm having a bit of just an emotional response to it, because it bothers me. I feel like this is, marriage to me is really the foundation and the fabric of society, and to try and redefine it and change it and
we didn't even go there.
With it.
Yeah, we didn't even go there. You could take another hour and explore. So what does this mean to a society when you take that fundamental relationship and you say, yeah, but it's not being all in. It's not being all for. It's not completely giving your heart. I do think that there are some potential societal implications of what that means and how that affects our ability as a society to do those kinds of things. But I don't know, probably not enough time to do that.
Well, I had mentioned this earlier, that like with divorce, it's traumatic to children of any age, because I think it disrupts our sense of identity. Like, part of my identity is who I grew up with, my parents, and where I celebrated our, Christmas or whatever celebrations we had, my birthdays. And if that's fractured, who do I celebrate this with and that with, and what's right and wrong? I just think it disrupts all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, children asking, where's mommy this week, or where's daddy this week?
Yeah.
And children aren't particularly rational. And when they want to spout and when they need somebody to be there, they're not going to mince words and say, mommy's off with some other dude and not here for me.
And children really need, strong foundational structures to help support them, even though they like to challenge and push the rules as far as they possibly can. They really want something solid to come back to.
we don't, and the literature just, I would say, almost completely ignores. There's just a few little things, but almost completely ignores things. Matter of fact, I did a word search once through a set of very important articles, research articles on this topic. I did a research, and the word child or children is mentioned about once in, what was it? Once every 35,000 words or something like that. It was actually quite rare. And so I really worry about that.
That seems like, for lack of a better term, leaving children out of it is very narcissistic to me.
Well, it's
because you're just not taking into account how it's affecting other people.
Yeah, it's adult-centric. It's about me, my needs, and my relationships, and we can work other things around this.
I think there's an orderly way of loving yourself and taking care of yourself, and then there's a disorderly way, and a lot of this kind of leads into that.
Yeah.
I did want to ask. This has been an amazing conversation, Alan. I'm glad you're doing this, and
thanks. Good.
This is great. I did want to say though, it does seem like what little we do know about this is that it's more men are kind of initiating this more so the men. I think you said it was 30% versus 20 or something.
Among openness to this concept, about 30% of younger men and 20% of younger women.
Is there a catalyst, do you think, that is maybe causing men to want to do this? Is there like an unhappiness with the relationship? Like, a lot of things are popping in my head, but like when I hear people say, "Oh, just one person," I'm like, it's so difficult just to be with. Like, it's so challenging in a beautiful way to be with one person and learn so much more about yourself. But I mean, is there a catalyst? That are people just avoiding something? Or are they chasing after some weird dream? Or
I think there's actually quite a few, but I'm sure that one of them is that they're in a relationship and they're having struggles with it, and some of the fact that maybe they didn't really fully commit to this relationship is part of that. We know that a lot of people are now kind of sliding into that decision to marry, rather than making that firm, okay, I'm all in. And that's one of the challenges of cohabitation, is that we see cohabitation, they don't last, but sometimes when they last, we tend to kind of slide into that marital. Yeah, we're together now. We have a kid. People are expecting I guess we're married. I guess we'll put a ring. We'll buy a ring. And then as the challenges continue, the fact that we haven't made that, I'm all in on this one, and made that decision, I think does make it a little bit more challenging than to say to fight off some of these, other possibilities that arise there. Saying, I don't think we ever really made that commitment that way to each other, and I think we should talk about it.
I think there's also other couples, my friends, who might say, "Oh, but this really helps us stay together."
There are those,
right?
absolutely.
It starts off some of the.
It's kind of stale.
Boredom.
It's boring.
Yeah, which is always a good sign, I think.
And I think there are superstars out there who do it and make it work. Right. All right, there are some superstars, but you and I are. Sorry, Rex, but you and I are not superstars.
Speak for yourself, Alan. I'm a rock star. Well, this has been awesome. I wish I could. I do have to stop shortly here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this now. But this is a great topic, and thank you for doing this.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Alan, for coming on and suggesting it. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a few minutes to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. When you hit the like button and leave a comment, your feedback helps us improve the show. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and connect with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and on Facebook at Stronger Marriage. Be sure to share with us what topics you want us to explore or what you loved about today's episode. If you want even more resources to improve your relationship connection, visit our website at strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producers Rex Polanis and Alexis Alcott and the team at Utah State University. And you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.